For more on this and things that are happening in the world, what have you, I'm pleased to be rejoined here on KOA by Roshini Rajkumar, a crisis specialist, C-suite advisor, main stage speaker, and podcaster, specifically host of the Crisis Files podcast. More on that in a moment because I was featured as a recent guest on the Crisis Files. She's also a licensed attorney and a former TV reporter. Roshini Rajkumar joins us now once again on KOA. Good morning, Roshini. How are you, my friend?
Jimmy, it's so great to be with you in this birth week, really, birthday celebrations for the country. And I realize not everyone gets as geeked out as you and I about the Declaration and about the Constitution, but what a great service you did by reading it this morning on the air and helping people remember and really, maybe for the first time, fully understand what a significant writing it truly is and was.
One of the things that I was breaking down afterwards, too, is the progression of the document. And you are all about communication. In fact, you wrote a book, Communicate That, Your Toolbox for a Powerful Presence. But part of that communication is the words that you use. And it goes from here's the introduction, the overall state of affairs. Here's what this document is about. Then we're going to tell you all of our gripes we have with the King of England, with the British Empire. Here are those gripes, item after item after item after item of complaints about what has been presented to us time and time again in terms of erosions of our liberty. And then coming around to the conclusion that says we have tried our best to let them know about our grievances, to advocate for change. Well, now we're at the point where we have to separate, become our own nation, and we are, by right, able to now, as an independent nation, do all of these things as other countries. And then we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, willing to put everything on the line for the words that you just read if you're reading the Declaration itself.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to it, and it's hard to even imagine all of those people who came together to write and pull together the different pieces of the founding days, founding years, founding really decade of this nation. And they came across different lines. And yes, sometimes in modern day, they get a little slammed because they were all men. But at that time, that's who was running the place. And they came together across different kinds of lines and changes and their own biases. And they said, let's make something new, different, and that was open and free. And that in itself is so glorious and so amazing. And not only did they just have this idea, they put down in writing some things we could follow for centuries to come. And I mean, that is what is so amazing among the many amazing things about this time in our history. And so I am very pleased we are celebrating as a nation 250 years of the Declaration of Independence. And just to also put into perspective some of what is key about how this plays out in modern day, Jimmy, this from the Bill of Rights Institute, a fun fact. Since the first 10 amendments, as we know them as the Bill of Rights, were ratified in 1791, the Constitution has been changed only 17 times in over 200 years. So that usually means an addition of another amendment, other minor changes, but only 17 times in 200 years. I mean, think about when you write a column for the Denver Gazette, how many times you're editing yourself before it gets to the editors, right? And, same with me as a former TV reporter, and I edited myself. My producers edited me. I lived under the Constitution because I was a member of the press at one time. So those are the kinds of things, if we really think about the dynamism of what started back in 1776 and those late 1700s to where we are today, I mean, it is astounding that we are tied together to our ancestors. For better or for worse, we're tied together by this document and the documents that would follow.
Something else I always look at it this way, and we would say this when I ran the Liberty Day Institute civic education nonprofit teaching kids the Constitution, as you'll recall, is the Declaration was the promise, the Constitution was the fulfillment. Is the fulfillment.
Yes,
yeah.
I love that line. Love it. Love it, love it. And, we have to. It is not just the people sitting in public office. It is not just the people we elect to those offices or that hold some kind of title. It is all of us living in this country, all of us, citizen and non-citizen, who the legacy of the Declaration, the legacy of the Constitution, it's in our hands. It is in our hands to follow or to abuse. And I really hope we don't abuse. And sure, differences happen, clashes happen, questions happen all the time. The founders made the three different branches of government so that they would be questioning each other and be taps on each other's power. Well, we, the people, are the tap on everybody's power from those three branches. So it is very much a living dialogue, living maybe even conversation between the government and the people. Over which that Constitution and that Declaration of Independence were meant to help create better lives. And the pursuit of freedom is very real, Jimmy. I wake up every day as an American citizen, and I am a naturalized citizen. I came to the U.S. from another country when I was a little girl and eventually became a citizen. But here's the thing. I wake up every day not fearing that I walk out my door and I'll be shot at or I'll be handcuffed for no reason. We have to remember that in most parts of the U.S., and I realize there are some places where there are some atrocities happening in our own country, but in most parts of the U.S., we can wake up every day, and if we are living by the law, we can walk out the door and be free. And that is really, really poignant.
Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, one quick thing before we break here, and that is when it comes to the separation of powers and the role of the people, I mean, the great James Madison, father of the Constitution, the fourth president of the United States, wrote in the Federalist Papers, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither internal nor external controls upon them would be necessary. That is to say, people aren't angels. We need government, but we also need the separation of powers. We need checks and balances. We need the people to hold the government accountable. Real quick.
So true. And boy, did Madison have a way with words or what? We absolutely do. There's nothing wrong with rules and laws. It helps everyone have sort of a protection, just kind of like, I hate to make the analogy, but our pets. When we train our pets, they need the power of us, the leader. And what we look at for these documents and the laws and statutes is that's the power to hold us all together and to keep all of us in check.
I like to think of the government as our pet. that makes me feel good, Roshini. Roshini Rajkumar joining us. Roshini, I want to talk for a moment as we continue our discussion about America and our founding principles, the Declaration, the Constitution. Bring us to the current moment. This week, we are seeing the U.S. Supreme Court wrap up their decisions. Of course, the court is the judicial branch of government among those three branches, the separation of powers that we were talking about. The Supreme Court, of course, by the way, breaking news, we just heard it in Gina's report, upholding the state laws banning transgender girls and women from school sports. I welcome that decision. I think that it is right and appropriate as a decision. I don't necessarily want to get into that unless you want to address any points to that yourself, and you are a licensed attorney yourself. But to talk about the significance of the Supreme Court and its rulings, and we've seen some varied decisions in terms of where they're coming down. They say, oh, this is a conservative Supreme Court where you have 6-3 in terms of conservative majority. Well, we are seeing decisions that are a mixed bag. Yesterday, some wins for more liberals across the country on several areas. So talk to us for a moment about the Supreme Court and its role.
I'm really glad you're bringing up the judiciary, and it's such a poignant week for the Supremes to be making some of the decisions they're making as we get ready to celebrate the 250th, or we are, celebrating it. the judges, the judicial branch, never meant to have become political. And if you ask judges, they themselves are not political. What happens is the narratives around the judges, whether that's reporters, columnists, talk show hosts, and definitely politicians that don't like the decisions or want to sort of get ahead of a decision of the Supreme Court, will look at the law, case law and statutory law, and they'll make a decision in fairness, and they'll do what they're supposed to do. They interpret the law. They do not make law. They interpret the law so that the other branches can then be aided in enforcing those laws. So I was really happy about a lot of the decisions this week, Jimmy, partly because they didn't come down on one side or another. You can't say that the Supreme Court went all in on every case for Trump or against Trump. I mean, they were looking at the law, and that is what people need to remember. Regular citizens definitely need to remember that, and I really urge politicians, anyone in office right now, to remember that and to stop trying to politicize what the judicial branch is doing. Because regardless of who appoints or nominates or votes in, and we know that that involves the president and the Senate, regardless of that happening, the judges then are independent playmakers once they're in office. They really don't care who got them in, which president nominated them. That is not their business anymore once they get into that seat.
Yeah, that certainly showed with some of the rulings yesterday in particular, Roshini Rajkumar. One thing that stands out yesterday that was more of a win for liberals is the ruling that said that ballots can be accepted after Election Day if they've been postmarked by Election Day. I would disagree with that ruling. I also think it's a bad policy for states to have. Here in Colorado, it is primary day today. On Election Day, on primary day, you have to have your ballot in by 7 p.m. So get it to the drop box, get it to your local vote center, whichever you choose, make sure to get your ballot in. But speaking of elections, Roshini, and we just got a minute or two left, let's talk about that. It is primary day here in Colorado, but we've been seeing primaries all across the country. And on your podcast, The Crisis Files, you just celebrated 200 episodes, and congratulations on that. And just so happened to have yours truly on for an episode called Ballot Box Blues.
That was very intentional, Jimmy. We never knew about, when we started 4 years ago almost, The Crisis Files, we never knew the 200th episode would land in the middle of June as the country's getting ready to celebrate the 250th. But it made very clear sense to invite Jimmy Sengenberger on to talk about elections. So yes, case file number 200 is Ballot Box Blues. It was such a joy to have you on to talk about the Constitution and voting and protecting voting. And you very astutely pointed out that the framers left elections to each state. So how states run their own elections and those processes about mail-in ballots or voting at the polls, all of those are left to the states. And so these are some of the things that the framers left, the founders of all of those writings left for us to figure out as the years would come. Is it good policy? So either. But now that we have the Supreme's decision on it, those opposing that can get in there and see how do we maybe change that. And so it continues to evolve. Elections continue to evolve, but the thing that should stay the same is it's one person, one vote. It should be fair. It should be clear. There should not be violence against election officials or election judges. And that is what's going to help maintain our free democracy.
On this primary day here in Colorado, I think that is a great point to end on in our conversation. Check out the website, thecrisisfiles.com, for the podcast episode Ballot Box Blues with yours truly, and more than 200 other episodes of The Crisis Files. Roshini Rajkumar, its host and our guest. Thanks so much for returning here on KOA, and happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day, Jimmy, to you and your listeners.